The coffee cup struck the wall and shattered 3 feet from his boots. Brown liquid bled across the gray carpet. Eleanor Brennan sat behind the dark oak desk in her wheelchair, late October light cutting hard across her face. "Get out," she said. Like the others, Daniel Hayes did not flinch. He bent down and gathered the broken pieces into a paper napkin, slow and careful, the way a man handles something that might still cut him. 7 assistants in 6 weeks. Not one had lasted past noon. He stood. "I'll be back at 7 tomorrow, ma'am." She did not answer. If you appreciate stories where the loudest person in the room is not the strongest, take a second to subscribe. Drop the city you're watching from in the comments. Now back to St. Paul, where the floor is still wet with coffee. The next morning, Daniel arrived at 6:58. The office on the 14th floor of the Brennan and Whitlock building overlooked the Mississippi River, the water already dark with November coming. Ruth Calloway met him at the elevator with a thin folder under one arm, and a look that did not bother to hide its surprise. "You came back. I said I would." Ruth had been the Brennan family attorney for 31 years. She had buried Eleanor's father in September. She had watched 7 assistants quit in tears since then. She did not smile at Daniel, but something in her shoulders shifted. "She's already in the corner office. Coffee black, no sugar. Don't ask how she takes it. Just bring it." "Yes, ma'am." He brought the coffee. Eleanor did not look up from her tablet. He set the cup on the leather coaster on the right side of her desk, the side closer to her good hand. He did not speak. He stepped back to the wall. She let the coffee sit for 40 minutes. When she finally drank, it was cold. "This is cold." "Yes, ma'am." "Make it again." He made it again. She let that one sit too. He made a third. By 11 that morning, 3 full cups of black coffee stood lined on her desk, untouched. At noon, she moved a board meeting from 2 o'clock to 3:30, without warning him, then to 4, then back to 2. He rebuilt the schedule each time without comment. He notified the 7 board members. He apologized on her behalf to each one in the same flat tone. At 3:15, she said, "There's a folder on the Henderson account I need from the file room downstairs. Bring it up." Now, Daniel stayed where he was. She looked up for the first time that day. "Did you not hear me?" "I heard you, ma'am. I leave at 3:25 every day. My daughter gets out of school at 3:40. I won't be late for her. I can get the folder after." The room went very still. Ruth, passing in the hallway, stopped behind the half-open door and did not move. Eleanor stared at him. Most men, she had learned in 2 years of running this company from a chair, broke when she stared. He did not break. He did not soften either. He just stood there with his hands at his sides, waiting to be either fired or released to go. "Go," she said. He went. She watched him through the window of her corner office. He walked across the parking lot in his gray jacket, opened the door of a 10-year-old Honda, drove east toward the elementary school. She stayed at her desk until the lot lights came on at 5:40. She drank none of the coffee. That night, alone in the house her father had built on Summit Avenue, she rolled her chair to the kitchen and opened the freezer for the first time in a week. There was nothing in it she wanted. She sat in the blue light of the open door for a long time. She thought about a man who had not flinched at a coffee cup. She thought about a girl who got out of school at 3:40. She thought about her father, who had told her once that you could measure any human being by what they refused to be late for. She closed the freezer. The 3rd week of November, Eleanor had a bad session with her physical therapist. Her blood pressure dropped halfway through standing practice. The room tilted. The therapist caught her before she fell, but her face went chalk white, and her hands started to shake. Daniel was in the doorway with a bottle of water and a clean towel before the therapist could call for help. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He set the bottle on the bench, helped lift her ankles onto a folded blanket, told her to breathe through her nose for a count of 4, hold for 4, out for 6. He pinched a small amount of salt from a packet in his coat pocket and stirred it into the water. "Sip, don't drink it down." She sipped. The room steadied. The therapist, 26 years old and 2 years out of school, watched all of this and said nothing. Later, in the hallway, she asked Daniel where he had learned that. He said, "A long time ago." She did not push. Eleanor did not mention it. But the next morning she drank the coffee while it was still hot. That Friday, the company hosted its annual benefit at the St. Paul Hotel, a fundraiser Eleanor's father had started 14 years earlier for homeless veterans in the Twin Cities. She had not wanted to go. She went anyway, because her father had gone every year, even the year he was dying. Daniel pushed her chair through the lobby in a charcoal suit that did not quite fit at the shoulders. A man in a Goodwill coat stopped in front of them near the cocktail tables. He was thin, gray at the temples, hollow under the eyes. He looked at Daniel for a full 5 seconds before he spoke. "Doc Hayes? 2-3, Helmand?" Daniel went very still. Then he nodded once. The man laughed, the kind of laugh that comes out as a cough. He stepped forward and put both arms around Daniel and held on. Daniel held back. Neither of them said anything for nearly half a minute. When the man finally stepped away, he wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and said, "You pulled me out of that ditch outside Marja. You and Sergeant Vega. I owe you a beer for the rest of my life, Doc." "You don't owe me anything, Mike." The man walked away into the crowd. Ruth Calloway stood 10 feet behind Eleanor's chair, holding 2 glasses of water, and she had heard everything. She did not say a word. She walked back to the bar and replaced the water with white wine and brought it to Eleanor without explanation. In the car going home, Eleanor watched Daniel's hands on the wheel. They were steady. They had always been steady. "Doc Hayes. A long time ago, ma'am." "How long ago?" 2 tours, Helmand and Kandahar. I came home in 2012, and then I went to nursing school. Then I met my wife. Then she got sick. He did not say the last part as a story. He said it the way a man reads off a list. Eleanor did not ask anything else, but she watched the back of his head all the way over the Wabasha Street Bridge. And she watched him in the rearview mirror at every red light, and she did not realize until the car was idling in her driveway that she had not thought once, in 40 minutes, about her own legs. That night, Ruth opened her laptop in her study and ran a record search on Daniel Hayes. She read for an hour. She closed the laptop. She poured herself a small bourbon, looked at the photograph of Eleanor's father on the mantel, and said very quietly, "Albert, your daughter has a Navy corpsman driving her to work. Silver Star, Marine Recon attached. You would have loved him." She did not tell Eleanor. Some things she had learned in 31 years of practicing law had to be found. By the second week of December, a rhythm had set in. Daniel arrived at 6:58, coffee on the right side of the desk by 7:05, schedule briefed by 7:15. He stayed in the corner of the room when she took meetings unless she signaled him out. He left at 3:25 every afternoon. He came back by 4:20 with a folder of school papers in the back seat, the seat warm where Lily had been. Eleanor had started looking up when he came back. One morning he arrived at 6:56 and found her already at her desk, lamp on, hair still wet from a shower. She had not slept. She had been reading the Henderson contract since 4. He set the coffee down without comment. She did not look up, but she said, "Thank you." It was the first time she had said thank you for the coffee. One Thursday she had to stay late for a conference call with a New York firm. She told Daniel he could go home for the evening. He did not argue. But 40 minutes later, she heard a child's voice in the hallway, and Ruth's quiet laugh, and then small footsteps coming through the open door of the boardroom. Lily Hayes was 8 years old, brown hair to her shoulders, 2 front teeth slightly large for her mouth. She was carrying a green backpack and a thick pad of drawing paper. She stopped in the boardroom doorway and looked at Eleanor in her chair the way children look at things that are unfamiliar but not frightening. "Hi," Lily said. "Hi. Are you the lady my dad works for?" "I am. My dad says you're really smart at numbers." Eleanor took a breath she had not planned to take. "Your dad said that?" "Yeah. He says you're the smartest person in the building. He says people can't tell because you don't show off." Daniel appeared in the doorway behind his daughter, apologetic. "Babysitter canceled. I had to bring her. 20 minutes, I promise." "It's fine," Eleanor said. Lily climbed into one of the leather chairs at the end of the long table and opened her pad of paper. She drew for the whole conference call. When the call ended, she walked the length of the table and handed Eleanor a picture. It was the Mississippi River, with a fish in it, and one small wheelchair on the bank, with a stick-figure woman in it, fishing. "Is this me?" "Yeah. My dad says you used to fish with your dad when you were little." Eleanor did not look up at Daniel for a long moment. When she did, he was looking out the window. She put the drawing in the top drawer of her desk that night. It stayed there. The next week, on the Friday before Christmas, She had to leave the office late again. From the 14th floor window, she watched Daniel's Honda idling by the curb below. Lily got out of the back seat with her backpack, then turned and looked up at the building. She waved. Eleanor lifted her hand and waved back. No one else saw. On the night of December 23rd, Eleanor sent Daniel home at 3. The office was mostly empty already. She had a small box wrapped in plain brown paper on the corner of her desk. She rolled to the door and handed it to him without a word. He stopped. "You don't. It's for Lily. A sketchbook. Hardcover. Acid-free paper. Open it after she's asleep so she's surprised in the morning." He took it. He looked at her for a moment. "Eleanor, go home, Daniel. It's Christmas Eve tomorrow." He went. In January, the community center contract went to a firm out of Minneapolis no one in St. Paul had heard of. The award was announced on a Tuesday morning. Eleanor read the press release twice. She read it a third time. She did not say anything. The bid had been theirs to lose. Brennan and Whitlock had designed 3 of the 4 largest public buildings in Ramsey County in the last 15 years. Their proposal was 30 pages cleaner than anyone else's, on budget, with a sustainability plan no one else had matched. They had lost it. Marcus Whitlock came into her office at 10:30 with 2 cups of coffee and a careful expression. He set 1 cup down on her desk without asking how she took it. "Eleanor." "Marcus, I know that one stings. Listen, we are going to be fine. We have 11 other active projects. The Henderson Tower starts pouring concrete in March, but I want to say something honestly, and I want you to hear me. May I?" She did not answer. Perception matters. In this market. In this city, the chair, he gestured at her, almost gently, the way a man gestures at a piece of damaged furniture he is being polite about. People see it before they hear the bid. We can talk about whether that's fair, but it is real. And I think we need to have a conversation about how the firm presents itself going forward. He waited. She did not blink. "Just something to think about," he said. He picked up his coffee and walked out. The cup he had brought her sat on the desk. She did not touch it. Daniel was in the room. He had been in the room the entire time, standing by the window with his hands behind his back. Marcus had not acknowledged him. She rolled her chair to the window. The river was frozen in patches now, gray slush along the banks. "What if it isn't me?" she said. Not a question. A thought spoken out loud because the room was the only place she could speak it. Daniel did not answer right away. He waited until she turned her chair toward him. "Then find out who it is, ma'am." She studied him. The gray at his temples, the lines around his eyes that had not been there when he was a young man pulling people out of ditches, the steady hands that had counted her breath in the therapy room. "Daniel." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. Not when we're alone in this office. My name is Eleanor." He nodded once. "Eleanor." She turned back to the window. She did not say anything else for the rest of the morning, but that afternoon she opened the locked drawer of her father's old desk for the first time since his funeral and pulled out the financial folder he had kept private from everyone, including her. She had not been ready to look at it before. She was ready now. At 10 that night, she sat in her father's old study under a green banker's lamp with the folder open. She read his handwriting on a yellow legal pad. The notes were dated August, 3 weeks before he died, in a hand growing shaky. "Margins on Henderson too thin. Riverside bid leaked. Look at Marcus's calendar. Look at his travel. Look at Phoenix." She had not known her father had been working on this. She had thought he was just dying. She put the pad down and put her hands flat on the desk and looked at the ceiling for a long time. The first week of February broke her. The therapist had been pushing for partial weight-bearing for 2 months. The new protocol, designed by a specialist in Rochester, required Eleanor to stand braced between parallel bars for 20 seconds at a time, 3 times a session. For 3 weeks, she had been able to do it. On the Wednesday after the community center loss, her left leg would not hold. She tried 4 times. On the 4th, she went down hard. The therapist caught her elbow. Daniel was in the doorway with a folded blanket before she hit the mat. She did not cry. She got back into the chair. She rode home in silence. At the house on Summit Avenue, Daniel carried in a small Tupperware of chicken soup he had made the night before. He had been doing this once or twice a week without comment. He set it on the counter and pulled out a saucepan to warm it. She watched him from the kitchen doorway. She watched the way his hands moved over the stove. The way he lifted the lid and stirred and tested the temperature against his wrist before pouring, it was the way her father used to test her formula when she was a baby. It was, more recently, the way someone else had tested soup for a dying woman in a hospice bed, in a small house in a small town somewhere in Minnesota, 3 years ago. She did not know that. She felt it. "Don't," she said. He looked up. "Don't bring me soup. Don't bring me coffee on a coaster. Don't pick up my coats. Don't count my breath. I'm not your dead wife, Daniel. I don't need a single dad with a savior complex looking for someone else to fix. Find another woman. Find anyone, just not me." The words were precise. She had built them on the way home in the silence. She had aimed them. He set the spoon down on the counter. He turned off the burner. He picked up his coat from the back of the chair. He looked at her once. Not angry, not even hurt, just very quiet. "Yes, ma'am." He walked out. She heard the door close. She heard the Honda start in the driveway. She heard it pull away. She sat alone at the kitchen island, with a saucepan of warm soup and the lights off, and she did not move for 2 hours. Daniel drove home through a gray St. Paul evening, with both hands on the wheel and his jaw set. Lily was at his sister's for the night. The apartment was empty when he came in. He hung his coat. He took off his boots. He sat down in the armchair facing the brick fireplace, where a framed photograph of Sarah at 28 stood on the mantel, holding a 1-year-old Lily on her hip on the lake at Brainerd. He did not cry. He just sat. The room got dark around him. He stayed. The next morning he picked up Lily from his sister's house at 7:30. He made her cinnamon toast. He drove her to school. He kissed the top of her head in the drop-off line. She asked him if he was sad. He said no, he was just tired. She believed him because she was 8, and she had never seen him lie. For 3 weeks Daniel did not come to the Brennan and Whitlock building. A new temporary assistant arrived from a downtown agency on the Monday after the soup. He was 29, well-dressed, efficient. He brought coffee at the right time and held doors, and said nothing she did not want to hear. Eleanor disliked him immediately, and it was not his fault. She slept poorly. She lost 4 pounds. The bid on the Henderson Tower required 40 pages of revisions, and she rewrote them herself at 2 in the morning. 3 nights running, she did not eat dinner 3 nights in a row. She declined a board chair's invitation to a Saturday opera. She rolled past the corner of her office where Daniel used to stand, and she had to look at the wall, because looking at the empty space made the room feel colder than it was. On the second Tuesday of February, Ruth Calloway walked into Eleanor's office at 8 o'clock in the morning and set a stack of bound documents on her desk that was nearly 4 inches thick. "What is this?" "This," Ruth said, "is what your father asked me to do the week before he died. He suspected something. He didn't want to be the one to tell you. He wanted the numbers to do it." Eleanor opened the cover. The first page was the executive summary of a forensic audit. The auditor was a firm out of Chicago Eleanor had never heard of. The engagement letter was dated 9 months ago. She read for 40 minutes without speaking. Ruth sat across from her with a thermos of tea and did not interrupt. The pattern was clear and patient and ugly. A shell company registered in Delaware in February of 2024, Whitlock Reeve LLC, with 2 named partners, Marcus Whitlock, and a man named Daniel Reeve, a high school classmate of Marcus's now living in Phoenix. Over 22 months, 14 Brennan and Whitlock bids had been undercut by Whitlock Reeve at the last minute, with margins suspiciously close to the figures only the chief operating officer could have seen. The community center contract was the 14th. The total estimated lost revenue, billed to the firm and rerouted in commissions and consulting fees through 3 layers of intermediaries, was $4.2 million. The pattern began the month after Eleanor's accident, not before. She closed the binder. Her hand was very steady. "He didn't cause it." "No," Ruth said. "He didn't have to. He just waited." Eleanor looked out the window. The river was full ice now, edge to edge, the kind of February you remember. "Ruth." "Yes." "Get him back." Ruth did not ask who. She picked up her phone. Daniel arrived at the building at 3:40 that afternoon, in his gray jacket, having dropped Lily at his sister's. He did not come up to the 14th floor right away. He stopped first in the parking lot and stood for a moment looking at the building, the way a man looks at a place he has been thinking about for 3 weeks and has decided to enter on his own terms. When he came into Eleanor's office, she was at the window. She did not turn around. "I need a driver tomorrow," she said. "I want to go to my father's grave." He was quiet for a long second. Then, "What time?" "Nina, I'll be here at 8:40. He left. She stayed at the window until the river went dark. The cemetery at Oakland was an hour out of the city. A low rolling place with old oaks that held their dead leaves through February. Albert Brennan's stone was granite, plain, with his name and dates in one line below. He built honest things. Eleanor did not get out of the car. Daniel had stopped the engine and walked around to lower the ramp, but she shook her head. She rolled her window down instead. She sat there in her wheelchair in the back seat and looked at the stone through the open window for 10 minutes in the cold. Daniel stood 5 steps back and did not interrupt. Then she said one sentence, just loud enough for the wind to carry. "I'm sorry it took me this long, Daddy." Daniel did not pretend not to hear it. He did not turn around either. He just stayed where he was, hands in his pockets, until she rolled the window up. When the window went up, he came around and got behind the wheel. She spoke before he started the engine. "I was wrong. About the wife thing. I shouldn't have said it. I wanted to make you leave because I was scared of how much I didn't want you to. That's not an apology. That's just the truth." He looked at her in the rearview mirror. He nodded once. "Okay. Okay. Yes, Mom. Okay." He started the car. They drove back to St. Paul in silence that was not the same silence as before. 3 days later was Lily Hayes' 9th birthday. Daniel did not bring it up. Lily did, in the elevator of the Brennan and Whitlock building on a Friday afternoon when she had come up to wait for her father to finish a call, holding a small invitation she had drawn herself. "It's at our apartment. It's not big. My aunt is bringing cake. You can come if you want." Daniel, behind her, started to apologize. Eleanor cut him off. "What time?" 6. "I'll be there." She arrived at 5:58. She brought a wooden box of 72 professional colored pencils, the kind Lily's school art teacher had told Daniel about once, and which he had not been able to justify buying. Lily opened the box and went very quiet, the way children do when something matters. She climbed into Eleanor's lap without asking, and put her arms around her neck, and stayed there for a full minute. Daniel stood in the kitchen stirring coffee with his back to the room, and did not turn around for a long time. Later, when Lily was opening a card from her aunt, she leaned against Eleanor's shoulder and said, "Are you coming to my school's spring concert?" "I'm singing." Eleanor said yes before Daniel could answer for her. Lily nodded like this had been settled long ago. After Lily fell asleep on the couch with the colored pencils still in her hands, Daniel and Eleanor sat at the small kitchen table and spread the audit binder open between them. They worked until 2 in the morning. Daniel made notes in pencil in the margins. Eleanor flagged the email metadata they would need pulled. They built a timeline of bids and shell company filings and bank routing numbers across 3 pages of legal pad. At 1:15, Lily woke briefly and called out from the couch. Daniel went and sat with her until she fell back asleep, one hand on her back. He came back to the table. Eleanor had not moved. She had not said anything, but she had marked his page for him with the cap of his pen so he wouldn't lose his place. At one point, Daniel looked up and said, "You know this is going to be public." "Yes. You know what they'll say. About the chair. About you." "Yes." "You sure?" "I'm sure." He nodded and went back to the page. She watched his hand move. She did not say what she was thinking, but he heard it anyway. The way he had been hearing things from her for 6 months without being told. The board meeting was set for the last Wednesday of February at 1 in the afternoon. Marcus Whitlock walked in at 12:55 with a leather portfolio and a tie the color of money. He did not know that Ruth Calloway had spent the previous evening on the phone with 3 of the 7 board members, including the chair, a 71-year-old woman named Margaret Hollis, who had played bridge with Albert Brennan every Thursday for 20 years. Eleanor sat at the head of the long table. Daniel sat in a chair against the wall, 2 seats behind her right shoulder, where the late afternoon light through the windows did not quite reach. She spoke for 11 minutes. No slides. No raised voice. She read 14 contract numbers out loud, and the matching loss figures. She named the shell company. She named the Phoenix partner. She read 3 lines from an email Marcus had sent the day before the community center bid closed. Marcus tried to interrupt twice. Margaret Hollis lifted one finger from the table the second time and said, very quietly, "Marcus, sit down." He sat down. The vote came at 1:47. 7-2 for removal as chief operating officer and immediate referral to civil council. The two opposing votes belonged to Marcus and a man named Alan Foss, who had been Marcus's college roommate. Both abstained when asked to defend their vote. Margaret Hollis turned to the rest of the table and said, "For the record, I want Mr. Whitlock's departure filed under cause, not resignation. I will not have this firm pretend this was anything other than what it was." Two of the remaining members nodded at once. The motion was added. The minutes would reflect it. Marcus stood. He looked once at Eleanor. There was no anger in his face. There was something worse, which was the small, stunned look of a man who had assumed for 2 years that the woman in the chair was no longer paying attention. He gathered his portfolio. He walked out of the room. The door closed behind him. In the hallway outside the boardroom, an associate would later say Marcus had stood for nearly 40 seconds with his hand on the elevator button before pressing it. He did not press it for the lobby. He pressed it for the parking garage. He left through the back. No one in the boardroom spoke for nearly 20 seconds. Margaret Hollis turned to Eleanor and said, "Your father would be proud of you, sweetheart. He was already proud of you. But today, especially." Eleanor nodded. She did not trust her voice. Ruth Calloway, on the way out, passed Daniel's chair. She paused. She said, so quietly only he could hear, "Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class, Silver Star. I knew the day you walked in. I just waited for her to find it on her own." Daniel did not answer. He walked out behind Eleanor's chair and pushed her to the elevator and rode down with her in silence to the parking garage. He held the door of the car open. He drove her home. He did not come inside. In the car going back across the river to his own apartment, Daniel checked his phone for the date. It was February 28th. Sarah's anniversary was in 2 weeks. He had not been counting. He had been counting other things. He pulled into the parking lot of his building and sat in the car for a long time before going up. 2 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, Daniel did not come to work. He had asked for the day off 3 weeks in advance. He had not said why. Eleanor had not asked. She called Ruth at 11 in the morning. Where would he be today? Of all days, Ruth did not need to ask. Resurrection Cemetery, South Side, Section 12. "Send me a driver, not him." She arrived at 1:15. The wind off the prairie was sharp. The cemetery was nearly empty. She saw him from 100 yards out, standing in front of a small stone with Lily sitting on the grass beside it, drawing on a pad with one of the colored pencils Eleanor had given her. She had brought white lilies. She had not been sure why white lilies. She held them on her lap as the driver pushed her chair across the path. Daniel turned when he heard the wheels on gravel. He did not say anything. He watched her come. She rolled up to the stone. Sarah Hayes, 1984 to 2023. Beloved wife and mother. She laid the lilies next to the small bouquet of yellow tulips Daniel had brought. Yellow had been Sarah's favorite color. He had told her that once, in passing, in a conversation about something else. She had remembered. Daniel's shoulders moved once. He turned his face into the wind so neither of them would see. Lily got up off the grass with her pad of paper still in her hand and walked over to Eleanor and slid her small fingers into Eleanor's. The three of them stayed there for a long time. No one spoke. The wind moved through the bare oaks at the edge of Section 12. At some point, Lily said very quietly, "My mom would have liked you." Eleanor squeezed her hand once. Lily held up the pad of paper. It was a drawing of 3 people on the bank of the Mississippi River. 2 adults and a child. The taller adult was a man. The one in the wheelchair was a woman. The child between them held both their hands. Eleanor looked at it for a long moment. She handed it back. "Can I have a copy of that one when you're ready?" Lily considered. "I can make you a real one. With the good pencils. I'd like that." Daniel did not turn back around for another minute. When he did, his eyes were red, but his voice was the same voice it had always been. "Thank you for coming. You don't have to thank me." "I do. I want to." She nodded. They drove back to St. Paul in the same car, the 3 of them. None of them spoke for the first 20 minutes of the drive. Then Lily, mostly to herself, said the spring concert was on April 19th, and her song was about birds, and she had a solo of 3 lines. Eleanor said she would be in the front row. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, but Eleanor saw, in the mirror, the corner of his mouth lift for the first time that day. Lily fell asleep against Eleanor's arm in the back seat, with the colored pencil still in her hand. Daniel drove. He kept looking in the rearview mirror, not to check the road, but to check that the two of them were still there. 6 months later, it was October again. The maples along Summit Avenue had gone the color of new copper. The community center contract had been pulled by the court in May and rebid in June. Brennan and Whitlock had won it back. The Whitlock-Reeves civil case was working its way through the Ramsey County courts. Marcus had left Minnesota. Brennan and Whitlock had quietly become Brennan and Hollis, with Margaret stepping in as interim partner. The firm had its best summer in 9 years. On a Tuesday afternoon, Eleanor stood between the parallel bars in the physical therapy room and took 3 steps. Her left leg shook. Her right leg held. Sweat ran down her temple. She did not look at the bars. She looked at the bench against the wall, where Daniel and Lily were sitting. Lily with her chin on her hands. Daniel with his hands folded between his knees. She took the 3rd step and sat down hard in the wheelchair the therapist pushed under her. She laughed. It was the first time anyone in that room had heard her laugh. Lily clapped. Daniel did not clap. He just looked at her, and she looked back, and something passed between them that did not need a word. 3 steps was enough. 3 steps was, in fact, a great deal. The next morning was a Saturday. The sun came up over the Mississippi at 6:41. At 7 o'clock exactly, Daniel Hayes pulled into the driveway of the house on Summit Avenue. He did not ring the bell. He used the key Eleanor had given him a month earlier, when she had said, in the same flat voice she used for board meetings, "It's stupid for you to stand outside in the snow next winter." He had not made anything of it. He had taken the key. He came in through the side door. The kitchen smelled like coffee. Lily was already at the kitchen island, doing a worksheet of long division, her tongue between her teeth the way it always was when she was concentrating. Eleanor was across from her, marking the answers in pencil. Lily looked up. "Hi, Daddy." "Hi, Peanut." Eleanor lifted her eyes. She did not smile, exactly. Something in her face softened in the way that does not need to be called a smile. He hung his jacket on the back of a chair. He poured himself a cup of coffee. He sat down next to Lily and pointed at one of the problems on the worksheet. "That one looks tricky. Show me." Lily showed him. Daniel was studying part-time for his paramedic certification, 3 evenings a week when Lily slept at her aunt's. He had taken the test for the first half in September. He had passed. He had not told Eleanor, but she had found the score sheet folded in his coat pocket while she was looking for a pen, and she had not mentioned it, and he knew she had seen it, and he knew she had not mentioned it on purpose. Some things did not need to be said. He had learned that from her. She had learned it from him. Outside, the river ran low and slow under the October sun. Inside, 3 people sat at a kitchen island, doing long division and drinking coffee that was the right temperature. 7 assistants had quit in 6 weeks. The 8th had never really been an assistant. He was just a man who had shown up every morning at 7.